Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inform New Hampshire. This is, I believe, our 14th episode, and we air the show on Manchester Cable Television Channel 23 on Monday evenings, Thursday mornings, and Saturday and Sunday. We also have a YouTube channel called Inform New Hampshire, and we have a Facebook page called Inform New Hampshire, so we would invite you to go visit there and watch our shows, like us, and subscribe, if you will. My name is Dean, and this is Richie to my right, and this is Michael to my other right. And Richie is my co-host. He and I are both state coordinators for National Liberty Alliance. The National Liberty Alliance is committed to reinstating all of the common law grand juries in all 3,133 counties in the country. And the common law grand jury is a tool for we the people to investigate our government and root out corruption and prevent the overreach of government. It was taken away from us in 1946 through a legal footnote, and they usurped the process, and now they control the grand juries, which is unconstitutional, and it works against natural law. We are a common law country. The Constitution is our founding document, is a common law document, and we believe that we are headed into deep peril due to the lack of awareness, focus, and the lack of we the people rallying ourselves behind that Constitution. So before we get started today, I just wanted to mention, I'm going to turn it over to Richie if you want to mention the Jerry DeLamus political prisoner still at large, still out in prison in Nevada.
Jerry DeLamus, as you know, was arrested over 2 months ago now. I think it was back in February. And I hope I'm saying this right, I think Jack Kimball is the one who's holding this fundraiser for him on Saturday, this coming Saturday, May 14th. It's from 4 to 6 p.m. It's at 120 Washington Street in Rochester. We'd like to have a good show of forth. I've encouraged all NLA members to please show up, and anybody else associated with the National Liberty Alliance. Jerry's being exploited, like we all are, but made an example of, because all he did was stand up for his rights. He tried to document this thing on camera as a peacemaker, and because he spoke up for himself, they're persecuting him. Let me see, there's also a function on Sunday from 12 to 2. It's the Women's Defense League is having their second annual Second Amendment rally, and I've asked NLA members to go up there in support of them. The Second Amendment applies to every American citizen, not just the women, not just the men, to all of us. And it's granted to us by God. It's the right for us to defend ourselves. We don't need the government's permission to do that, although they like us to think differently. With that, I'll turn it back to Dean so he can introduce Mike Wright, one of the members of NLA and a guy I admire because he stood up for himself. He can discuss that in a few minutes.
Thanks, Richie. Just to tee this up a little bit, Michael was involved in a situation a few years ago down in Pelham where he was walking home from a store and was addressed by a police officer who attempted to and did violate his fundamental rights simply for walking through I guess it was a park or something on the way home.
Park, yeah.
Interestingly enough, this particular video I had seen several times before I ever met Michael, and after Michael had been to a few of our meetings and I got to know him, it was a few weeks after I'd known him that I realized he was the one in this video. So it's the video is titled "Cops Get Owned. Arrests Leads to Legal Financial Settlement from Town in Rural New England." So if you Google "Cops Get Owned" and "Arrest Leads to Legal Financial Settlement," you'll find it.
Before you start picking on the police, why were you walking home, Mike?
Yeah.
That's suspicious activity.
Very suspicious.
Right, I know, in the middle of the day.
Walking home.
I know, in the
And
middle
I believe
of the day.
That's your story, right?
Yeah,
you had
right, yeah. I know, I should know better, but...
Yeah, I believe you had a suspicious grocery bag in your hand.
That's right.
Gave the cop pause.
Smelly onions.
Yeah. But it's an interesting video, and Mike did a great job of simply trying to stand up for his own rights. And in the end, they arrested him. But in the end, again, Michael won a settlement. He took him to court, and I believe that particular court was a common law court. Was it?
It didn't even get as far as the court system.
Oh,
It was
okay.
settled out of court.
Okay, all right.
My main goal, though, was not the settlement. I didn't even think twice about money. My main goal was to get them further educated, which they did have to get additional
Tell us what they did.
training.
What was the outcome?
Well, there was the settlement. They also had to go through additional training.
Okay.
The entire police force.
Right.
On what's called Terry stops,
Okay.
which is basically due process.
Yeah.
And I also retained the right to disclose what happened, which is why I was able to keep that video up online and
Fantastic.
educate more people.
Yep. Did they try to muzzle you in that regard?
It was no choice. That was not
Yeah,
even a
okay.
part of the deal.
All right, good.
They had to go to court and embarrass themselves, and I don't think they wanted that. So that's why it
Okay.
settled really quickly.
All right. Well, good job.
Oh, thank you.
Always been proud of you for that.
Thank
And,
you.
you know, most of us, me included, maybe not Richie over here, but when I, encounter police officers, I get very nervous, very fearful. You just don't know how that's going to
That's the
turn out.
point.
And nowadays, it seems to be worse than what it used to be in the past, where police officers are unpredictable.
But,
And I know there are a lot of great police officers out on most police forces. However, I do believe the system is corrupt, and corruption gets promoted within the system, and it creates,
Because of our ignorance.
and it's a bad outcome for we the people.
everyone's in general.
Yep.
People of authority as well.
Yeah,
Following orders as it
power
were.
corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yes. Forget who said that.
Speaking of that, though, that's
Yeah.
a nice segue, because Mike wanted to discuss getting into not absolute power so much, but absolute in terms of being sovereign and whatnot.
Right. The
And,
word sovereign's got
Let
a
you, let you pick up on that, Mike. You can
bad
start.
reputation, and it's actually where this country started. The sovereignty of the people.
Right.
Which originally was with the king, as I have in my notes here. He had ultimate power to make all the rules and was not bound by them.
Who is this king?
Anyone. King George is the one leading up to the revolution,
Right.
but bound by only natural law, which was enforced through the common law by
But he
people.
did have limitations, though, right? With the
Well, with
Magna
the
Carta.
Common law,
the charters.
right.
Okay.
He couldn't do harm to other people, just as the
Right.
common law is with us today.
Yep.
But I like this as far as the natural law goes. I like this. An anonymous author, but it says the fact that you wholeheartedly believe that the law of gravity is unconstitutional and a violation of your sovereign rights does not absolve you of the adherence to it, which is just
Yeah.
common sense.
Yep.
You can't write laws against nature, and that's when you're writing laws against the sovereign, you are writing
And
laws
so you
against the nation.
and so you're using that as a metaphor for natural law, which includes, for instance, we have the right to self-defense.
That's correct.
And
That's
that
correct, yeah.
particular right to self-defense, if someone believed that it is not a natural right, there would still be a natural,
They would find someone that believed in it and find out otherwise. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yep.
and just like gravity would not yield for someone who didn't think it was fair.
Exactly. Or correct.
All right.
If I can jump in, I wanted to say
absolutely.
something about sovereign. In 1775, this is just my way of giving an example. 1775, the king laid down all the rules, levied all the taxes for the people in the United States, and we had to follow them and pay them, which is what led up to the revolution. But in 1776, when we signed the Declaration of Independence, we took that pyramid structure with the king on the top and the people on the bottom, and our founding fathers went like this and turned it upside down. And they put the people on top. At that point, we the people became the sovereign, and we the people were the most radical words spoken up to that point. And the state government was under the people, and the federal government was under them, okay? Because in the Constitution, this book right here, the federal government is laid out when the states signed this, which made this, in effect, the Constitution. Prior to the signing of this, the federal government didn't exist in Article 1, 2, and 3. That's why it's important everybody read this thing. But we are the sovereign in this country, and by the way, I've seen cops on video saying the sovereign citizen movement, how dangerous they are and everything else, and I believe it's the ignorance of those cops that we're talking, the sovereign citizen killed a couple of police officers. And I'm not advocating anybody shoot anybody. I'm not saying what they did is right, but just because one person killed 2 cops doesn't mean the whole bunch is bad.
Well, look at it from the other perspective as well. The police officers also have a few bad apples, and we shouldn't put them all in the same.
That was going to
basket
be
as
my
well.
point, Mike, is that I've watched cops shoot people in the
Exactly.
back.
Yeah.
And I don't think every cop is a
It's
killer
the
or
extremes
bad.
we have to be worried about.
Right,
It's
there's
not
good
the
and bad and
person that
everything.
believes that they should be sovereign. It's not the person that believes that they're
Exactly.
laws right.
It's
But,
good and bad and everything.
Yeah.
Well, sovereign is the beginning of jurisdiction, is it not? Like if-
Yeah, it would be. It would be. That would be the authority, the authorizing.
So we're going to talk a little bit
agent.
about jurisdiction, aren't we?
Well, that's what it was about. Jurisdiction,
Yep.
sovereignty, they're all the same, authority, pretty much. But I wanted to add, leading up to the revolution, though, before all that taxation came in, the colonies were on their own. There was no outside influence from England. It wasn't until the 7 Years' War where George had run up a big debt, and he was saying that it was our debt because he was defending us against the French. But the colonists were saying, well, we've never had you rule over us before. Why are you going to start now? And you've been making plenty of money over the decades off of the fur trade and the commerce. So you've made your money. You don't need to take it out of us. But, done without representation and the whole deal. So it was kind of new to them, having George come in and say all these, you owe us this tax, you owe us this tax, you owe us this. I mean, I have one thing, and I wrote this down because it's New Hampshire, and it's actually Hillsborough County, and I think it's local history that nobody really knows about. Have you ever heard of the Pine Tree Rebellion?
No, I can't say
Somebody
so.
mentioned it, but I don't know anything
I
about
may
it.
have mentioned it
I think
to
you did, yeah.
It happened here in New Hampshire, in Hillsborough County. It was the pine trees were valued by the king because the pine trees here were better than the ones in England. They're a lighter wood, so they're more buoyant,
Okay.
and they're more flexible, so they don't break as easily in a heavy wind
Snap.
or in a gust. So they were valuable to him. So he claimed ownership to all the ones that were over a certain diameter. And even if they were on your property, you couldn't cut them down.
Okay.
Well, during this time, they were being strict on these things, trying to collect taxes, and the commissioner or whomever it was came out to inspect and saw the tree gone and saw the tree at a lumber yard and charged all these people for taking the king's tree. So he wanted to meet with the person who was the property owner, or a couple of them, and they agreed to meet with him at a local tavern where he was staying. It was an inn tavern.
Yeah.
And they basically did ambush the man. They walked in with switches, approximately 20 men, from what I understand, switches from apple trees,
Oh, wow.
and whipped him until he put his clothes on and drove him out to his horse, which they had cut off his tail and cut off his ears, which renders it it's worthless at that point. You can't get any money. It would be the same
okay.
thing as smashing up somebody's car,
Okay.
smashing up the headlights, and then they made him get on the horse and tied him to it and whipped the horse and went off to
Send
town.
them off.
Yeah, the local judges were not really willing to do much about this, considering it was so many people, so they kind of gave him a slap on the wrist. But that was Tea Party-ish type
Right.
of, ordeal. You don't hear that much about it, but the people were not happy about these people coming in and telling them what to do after years and years and years of not
Right.
having anyone.
And
to-
the king all of a sudden claiming all the trees
Yeah,
that were a certain
yeah,
diameter.
yeah. Yeah, well, and other things, coming in, taking taxes for things, and
Yep.
the paper tax and everything else that they were enforcing.
Housing the soldiers in
That's
people's
right.
homes,
That's right. Yep.
and also forcing a new currency on the colonies.
That's right. They took
Yep.
away the colonial script.
And I
right?
think that was one of the biggest issues.
I think it was Benjamin Franklin said that it wouldn't. We could have borne the small taxes if it weren't for the fact that they took away our money,
Yep.
which left them poverty stricken. It really ruined the economy in the colonies.
And as Mr. Rothschild said, I care not who
Makes the
who's
laws.
makes the laws in a country if I control the currency. Anyway, something like that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you control the currency. You control the laws. You control
He's
everything.
proven that.
Yeah, yes,
Yep.
certainly has. Worldwide.
As an example, the U.S. dollar, which is the currency of the Federal Reserve was instituted back in 1913, I believe, and currently that dollar is worth less than 2% of what it was back then. And that's done through currency manipulation, inflation, and that's what the controlling power has the ability to do to a currency over time, so that what they're actually doing is extracting the wealth of a nation, and they're capturing that wealth for themselves, and they're at the same time holding that nation captive, because if a government can keep the people poor or busy working,
Subservient.
subservient, they prevent the people from becoming wealthy. It keeps people from pushing back against government and their attempts to control, which seem to be endless and ongoing and forever progressive. So,
Well, which is the whole idea behind the whole crash in the 1930s and keeping everyone poor for so long that they were just so dependent on the government. After a while, it was
yeah, I've heard it
just
said that
commonplace.
the Great Depression would have only lasted a year or two had they not implemented all the policies to extend it to 12 years.
It was Bernanke came out not too long ago and even admitted the fact that,
Right.
and even made some type of public apology. What, 80 years later is going to do a lot of good now, but they orchestrated it and they kept it going.
So with jurisdiction, do we want to talk about the?
Well, I have something to add
Yeah, go ahead.
on jurisdiction. This is my belief, by the way. I haven't heard, as a matter of fact, I haven't heard anybody, any constitutional expert talk about this, but it's my contention that the 7th Amendment under the Bill of Rights, where it says any fact tried by a jury, grand jury or otherwise, cannot be re-examined in any court in the United States. That means that the people are the sovereign, and when they decide, 12 people on a trial jury or 25 on a grand jury, their decision is final. No one overturns it. It says it right here in the supreme law of the land. This isn't me saying it, this is the book saying it. But anybody's willing to obviously disagree with me, but if that doesn't mean what I just said, what does it mean?
It's the
And
common
why
law.
does it say it?
Common law is the people's, and the people are the government, and we are the sovereign, and we are the common law is the people's law. It's the highest jurisdiction there is.
Although that pyramid has been turned over.
It has
so-
been. I actually even have
We're
that
on
in
the
my
bottom
notes.
again.
It's so funny that you say that because I have about the hierarchy of it started with the people being the sovereign, going to the counties or the towns, to the states, telling them what they need, and then the states maybe going off to the federal government saying we need this. And the government didn't have its own funding, and they had certain powers. They were allowed to, I can't declare a war with France. We gave that right to the federal government.
Yep.
Not every right, that right. But they didn't have to ask us for permission, but they did have to ask us for money. No direct taxation. You have to have it. You have to have it approved through the states and the citizenry. Saying yes. So that's the power of the purse.
Yep.
Now the government, through the 16th Amendment, which was not legally ratified and is unconstitutional, they've taken away that power of the purse, and now they don't need to ask us for
Run amok.
permission. They've got the money already.
Yeah.
They're deciding what we get to keep to do our, and it's supposed to be the other way around. But they've got all the money that they want already, so they don't have to ask Congress anymore. They don't have to ask the people for the money. They've got it. They've already stolen it. And through our acquiescence, because we don't know the law and its ignorance and its contract law and trust law, which is a whole
Well, that's a good point, Mike.
showing itself.
No, a lot of people say, when you tell them, read this book, they say, I can't be bothered with it.
It's so
The
short.
problem is Article 1, Section 8, where it says what the government can do, what we allow them to do. You've got the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, I can't even remember them all, the DEA, the FBI, the CIA,
NSA, the
BLM, all the alphabet government agencies, they're operating unlawfully.
yeah.
They have no legal right or lawful right to be operating because we didn't grant them that permission, but they do.
No, and that's the whole thing with the tail wags the dog.
Yep.
The agencies are telling the legislatures what to write for laws, and mandating things over the legislatures instead of the other way around. I mean, that's even one more step over the whole government.
The EPA is a classic example. You own a home, the EPA comes in because they say, well, you want to build something. Well, you can't because you got wetlands. I don't know what they call it, if that's the right word. But, no, you can't do that. Now, here's an agency that shouldn't even exist, and they're telling you can't build on your land.
That's right. Well, another thing that I think is funny is they have the navigable waterways. That's part of their jurisdiction. Well, now they consider any water to be navigable waterways because that water will lead into navigable waterways eventually. So this puddle in my yard that's leading into that creek, that's leading into that river, that's leading into that estuary, whatever, is going into, so they lay claim to all the water.
Here's the kicker. The interpretation of this document is up to the people and not the government. We wrote this. We didn't say, here, you interpret this and walk away. Well, we did, in essence, walk away from it because of our ignorance, all of our ignorance. But what I'm trying to say is that the federal government can't interpret this. Judges can't interpret this. They rule on the letter of the law, not the interpretation of it.
No, that's right.
You're not supposed to anyway, but they do. And that's why if more people understood this book, you wouldn't have this problem.
Well, and the people are not bound by that book. The people that take office are bound by that book. The only reason why that book should have anything to do with you is if one of those people that takes one of those oaths tries to take your rights away. Then you go to that
Then
book
you know
and
it.
you say, this is the authority that I have over you. You don't have that authority over me, and this is the punishment that's laid out for you.
Well, we read a good.
It's all written
we
right
read a
there.
good example of that on our first show, where if a person's in their home and somebody breaks in and accosts them, that's a fundamental. Somebody's broken their fundamental rights, but it's not a constitutional violation. But if a police officer breaks into someone's house, or a U.S. government official breaks into someone's house and accosts them, that's a constitutional violation. So they are bound by the Constitution.
That's right. That's correct. Yep.
We, the people, through our states, created that federal government, and what a monster it's become, huh?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, the
Get right to
police,
it.
the police are bound by the Constitution, so there's a punishment involved there, but actually they're involved in a personal way. So you can take them to a common law court, which was what your normal remedy would be with any thug that broke into your house. But when it involves a cop, it also involves that, and there are additional penalties as well.
Right.
Not immunities that they nowadays get. There should be additional penalties. You take that oath, you take on that responsibility, you break that oath, there are additional penalties, not immunities.
Right.
Do you think that could tie into the Seventh Amendment with the juries?
It could.
Well, I mean, they did steal it from us.
Well, they did. Oh, absolutely. Well, that's another.
Now they control it. They do jury tampering constantly. They give them psychological profiles to fill out for jury members.
There is not a jury out there that is not tampered with.
Every one of them are,
Yeah.
They're all tainted. Well, they're tainted by the fact that the federal government has has anything to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
U.S. versus Williams proves that. Belongs to the people.
Recently arrested, and the man was let off on jury tampering because he was trying to give people pamphlets on their way into jury duty to try and inform them of the fact that they do have the right to nullify laws that are unjust and that are unconstitutional. And if it's unconstitutional, it's void, ab initio, immediately, non-protunct, as if it never existed. And we have the right to do that. And the government doesn't want that because it takes away their revenue scheme, and they can't just go ahead and charge us. Imagine telling the king that on his highway that you were traveling 60 and a 50, and now you've got this ticket, and if you don't pay it, I'm going to take away your right to travel at all. That's not going to fly. We as the sovereign have that same opportunity. Those laws are for commerce. Those aren't for we the people.
Right.
That's for people in commerce that have signed up for those contracts. Unfortunately, we have through licenses unknowingly that we don't need. But that's the essence of it. We're the sovereign. We don't.
Knowledge is power, and without it,
unless you're not
they can
breaching
take
the
advantage of
peace,
us,
you're
right?
not going 500 miles an hour with by a schoolyard and possibly taking down a couple of kids.
Yeah, but that comes with responsibility.
But that's common law. That's the breach of
Responsibility.
peace, right? That's
If you do something wrong, you are responsible
That's
for
right.
your
That's
actions.
right. That's why we're supposed to have peace officers and not police officers who are just code officers.
enforcers,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're enforcing codes which are statutory and they don't pertain to the sovereign. They pertain to U.S. citizens, but not to sovereigns.
Yep. So
There's
we're
a
down to
difference.
about 2 minutes. Do we want to? Did you already mention Jerry DeLemus's fund?
I mentioned Jerry, but I want to say one other thing because I neglected to do that. If
Okay.
you can't make the fundraiser on Saturday from 4 to 6 at 120 Washington Street in Rochester, you can go to his website or a website to contribute to his legal fund. It's www.patriotjerry.com. Thank you.
So once again, the National Liberty Alliance, we meet once a week here in Manchester. That's how we got to know Michael here. He came up and joined us. Is a very faithful participant in that, and we, the subject matter varies quite a bit from week to week, but the overall goal is to reawaken the American people, to reawaken that American spirit, to ignite that sense of self-reliance and responsibility and ownership of this country. And one of the ways to regain control and ownership of this country is through the common law grand jury. So we hope to reestablish that. Actually, we are working towards that. The National Liberty Alliance is a grassroots organization. You can look it up at nationallibertyalliance.org. There's a great civics course there. It's about 100 hours.
120 hours.
120 hours. It's fabulous. You would learn more than you ever thought you would about the history of this country. We have Chris Ann Hall, constitutional speaker, coming to the VFW in Milford in New Hampshire here on July 11th. We hope you all will set that date aside for yourselves. It's
5:30 p.m.
5:30 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us. Michael, thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime,
And,
yes.
we'd love
This
to
is
have
a
you back
pleasure.
again, and we'll get a little more into jurisdiction and how the court systems are tricking us into their Admiralty jurisdiction rather than common law for we the people. So thanks again. Thank you, Richie, and we'll talk to you soon.